Okay, so on to VirtualBox. VirtualBox is very, very simple. It was developed by a company called Inotech, who are German, I believe, and it was acquired by Sun in February 2008, so we've had it for about a year now and we've been sort of stamping our own authority on it. Originally it started out as a closed source thing, and then it was sort of opened up, so there's two editions. There's kind of like a closed source edition and an open source edition. It doesn't really matter, they both do the same thing. The open source edition has a few restrictions on what it can do because of things like device driver licensing, that kind of thing. But as you'd expect from a Sun technology, it's open source and you can just download and use it for free. It's very simple and easy to use. Flip side of that obviously is it's not as powerful as some other virtualization technologies. So for example, it's not able to do quite as much as the more powerful or more recent versions of VMware. And it doesn't have the same kind of seamless integration as Parallels on the Mac. Parallels will tend to let you just run a Windows app in a window in macOS without having to have a sort of separate virtual machine window for it. VirtualBox doesn't do that kind of thing. It's more, basic to the thing, just get up and running really easily. So for the host operating system, you can install VirtualBox on all of the major OSs. Windows, any version, so basically XP, Vista, probably work in 2000 as well. I wouldn't imagine it's going to work on 98, but then again, if you're still using 98 or ME, you need to be short. Linux, all major versions, so Red Hat, Fedora, Ubuntu, whatever you like, it will be supported on there, and I think you'll probably be able to just get it through the package manager. Alternatively, you can just download it from the website. OpenSolaris obviously supports it, and you can run it on OS 10. Now, same list there for the guest OSs, with one noticeable exception. OS 10. Anyone know why that is?
Licensing.
Licensing, exactly. Apple don't like playing with other companies. They refuse to let you virtualize OS 10. The only way that you're allowed to run OS 10 is if you buy a Mac. You can't run it on non-Mac hardware, it's not allowed, even though it's perfectly capable of doing so, because they run on PCs these days, they run on Intel PCs. But you have to buy a Mac to do it, and you're not allowed to virtualize it. So if you want to test that your cross-platform application runs on OS 10, like I do with my final year projects, you have to get a hold of a Mac, which, as you all know, is not very cheap. So that's why OS 10 isn't supported as the guest OS. It's because they won't let you. What's that? Oh, I dare say there are hacks that you can do. There's the whole Hackintosh scene of getting OS 10 to run on stuff that you're not supposed to be allowed to. But also, I couldn't possibly encourage you to use something like that as, as part of my talk. But yes, there is stuff out there that will let you do that. It's questionable how stable it will be, because you never know when Apple's going to decide to just break something with an update or whatever. So yeah, generally not a good idea. If you're that bothered about OS 10, you're going to have to drop the money for a Mac, most likely. Just a footnote, you can actually get this stuff running on BSD and OS 2 as well, if the mood takes you. BSD is probably easier to get up and running than OS 2. From what I read, OS 2 is quite difficult to emulate. If anybody here actually wants to emulate OS 2, which I doubt. Okay, so virtualization with VirtualBox. Let's have a quick run through of how VirtualBox works. So, if you've been to the past two demos that I've done on OpenSolaris, you've already seen VirtualBox because it's what I've been using to run my OpenSolaris demos. Reasons being that it makes it easy for me to switch back and forth between my presentation and what I'm doing, but also because it allows me to do clever things like give it lots of fake hard disks, so I can do my ZFS demo. So currently I've got my OpenSolaris machine running, which is as easy as taking the thing that I've already set up and hitting start, which is what that show button would be showing. To create a new virtual machine in VirtualBox, it's nice and easy. So you go to the new box, and it's got a nice friendly wizard. It's very unlike Sun. Normally Sun is all command line stuff, and it's quite difficult to get used to. VirtualBox is the antithesis of that. It's really, really easy. Give it a name, so demo VM, whatever the hell you want to call it. I happen to have an Ubuntu CD in my CD drive, so I'm going to use that. Now you can use just generic Linux operating systems, or you can have tailored versions, which basically that means that it sets up the virtual machine ideally for that particular version of Linux. Select the amount of RAM, so this is dependent on how much RAM you've got available in your system. Now I'm lucky in that I've got 3 gigs of RAM in this system, so I can jack that up quite a bit. So I'm going to give it, we'll give it a gig. That should be plenty for Ubuntu. That's what we need to do. That's close enough. Okay, don't know what it'll do if I don't give it 1024 exactly. That'll be interesting to see. The next thing you need to do with booting up a VM is give it a virtual hard disk. So obviously any operating system is going to need a hard disk to run from, because it needs to be able to install stuff. But in a laptop or something like that, you've only got one hard disk. Now, if you want, you could just give it an entire hard disk if you've got the space available. But more normally, you'll just give it a file. Now, what you can do with this software is you can create virtual disks that dynamically expand. So you don't have to say, right, okay, I want 16 gigs available to my Ubuntu VM, and then suddenly you've lost 16 gigs of your hard disk. It'll actually only use as much as it needs, so it dynamically expands. Tell it how big you want it to be able to get, so I'll say, I don't know, 8 gigs, fine. Hit finish. There we go, we've got a virtual disk image, which is what the VDI stands for. And there we go, I've created a virtual machine. Then you can hit the start button, and the first time you run it, it gives you a little first run wizard helping you install an operating system. So obviously this is just like booting an actual PC. So you go through the same stages of installing the operating system. So generally you stick your live CD in, or your Windows install CD or whatever, and just run from that. What it lets you do is it lets you mount your CD-ROM device or an ISO file. So for example, here I've got the OpenSolaris ISO file, which is what I'm running OpenSolaris from, or you can just use your CD-ROM drive, which is what I'm doing because I've got the Ubuntu CD in my actual physical drive. Hit finish. VM starts up. Take a drink while it does that. So what you just saw there was the equivalent of BIOS. So you can select your boot device and everything from there. And if you've ever booted in Ubuntu, that should look very familiar to you. That's the Ubuntu Live CD. So if I then let that get on with it, eventually, very, very slowly, because it's running in a VM and off the CD as opposed to an ISO, it'll get into an Ubuntu desktop. So that's 5 minutes that's taken to get a virtual machine up and running. Some limitations of what a virtual machine can do. Obviously 3D acceleration is not going to work very well. There is experimental support in VirtualBox for 3D acceleration, but certainly doesn't work for me. I can't get Compiz working with it. However, it is there. But this is obviously pretty damn handy if you're wanting to run, say, software that you're developing in another operating system to make sure that it still works. Maybe for your final year project or whatever you want to say in your report. Oh yes, I developed it in Java, so it's nice and cross-platform, and then this lets you actually test that on a whole bunch of different operating systems without having to go through the hassle of actually physically installing them on your disk. Because, as we all know from last week, partitioning is a complete and utter pain in the arse for that kind of thing, as opposed to ZFS. So I'm going to kill that machine off because, let's face it, we've all seen live CDs before. What I'll do is I'll just power off the machine. So just as it has a BIOS and all the rest of it, it also lets you simulate a power button, so you can just yank the power out from under it, or send it the soft shutdown, same as when you're pressing the power button. Or you could do save the machine state, which is what I usually do, which is essentially just like hibernating. It basically takes what the virtual machine is currently doing, shoves that into a file so that you can then resume it exactly where you left off, which is quite handy. I'm just going to kill that one off though. So that is VirtualBox. Any questions about VirtualBox before I go on? Nope. really, really simple. I mean, it does exactly what it says in the tin. It's really easy to use.